Welcome to PrimeAlpha's interview series, insights from industry practitioners discussing their journey and their discoveries. Hello, my name is Amanda Jogia, the CEO of PrimeAlpha, an online ecosystem bringing together alternative opportunities and their investors. I would like to introduce Dipak Jogia, co-founder and managing partner at Highmore, an alternative asset management firm with an opportunistic investment approach. Dipak heads the firm's trade and specialty finance business, which provides working capital release solutions to small and medium-sized companies in order to facilitate growth, and has funded over $1 billion across 23 industries. Welcome, Dipak. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
For those who might not have guessed already, Dipak is my husband, and really excited to be doing this with him for the first time.
I'm excited too.
All right, let's get started. I know his journey, but Dipak, for the audience, walk us through your career journey and what led you here.
Well, thanks for inviting me to do this. I know you've done north of 100, so you're well versed in doing this. But in terms of my background and my experience, my life experience, not just my professional experience, I'm from the UK originally, Indian heritage. I grew up in the family business and the retail business and jewelry. And that's really where I grew up. Being an immigrant family, coming to the United Kingdom, it's definitely a real experience, and it's about survival and building a foundation and getting ahead. And so being at school, and I don't mean university, but really middle school, high school equivalent in the UK, what did you do at the weekends? You went to work in your family's business. Summer holidays, that's working the business. And that's really where I learned to deal with clients, working with clients on the one side, your buyers, and then working with the supply base and really building trust and confidence on both sides. I went and studied at the London School of Economics. I think my parents wanted me to not go into the trade. I was actually very inclined to go into the trade. That was actually my stated goal. I don't think I've ever told this to you, but my dad did a very good job of really trying to think bigger and do something else. And so I studied at the London School of Economics, both my undergrad and postgraduate studies, which is a really great experience right in the center of London. Fantastic school with a lot of really sharp people and cultural melting pot. The ability to interact and hear great experts in different subject matters. And then I started my career initially in the fund of funds business in the late 1990s, when the industry was really going through a real growth through that period in the UK. And at that point, you really had people with great backgrounds and pedigrees, but little or no verifiable track record. And that really showed that this business is very much a bet on not only in a particular area, but really making a bet on people. And that's been a common denominator that's really come through to today. I then worked for a fund of funds, then worked for a bank. My big break, frankly, came when I moved to the US. I was hired by a firm called Front Point Partners. And Front Point Partners was a spin out of Tiger Management, where the business model was to go out and find interesting investment areas, research those, but then find the right talent and internalize that, but build businesses around them. And that acting as a principal in that approach, where you're not simply just allocating capital, but you're building a business, was frankly a new skill set. And I got to work with some really wonderful and really talented people. Fast forward, in terms of my experience, I think that period where we had the global financial crisis, we recognized that this would be a credit recession. We participated on the subprime short trade. The firm got featured in the Michael Lewis book and the movie. It's one of those things where you're actually at the real movie. And I think you learn a lot from that, because certainly when we were short leading up to it, every short seems obvious in hindsight, but when you're leaning against the wind, it can be really, really lonely, and you really require fortitude for that. So that's something else. And we recognize that what would happen would be a fundamental credit recession, how credit was created, would fundamentally change. And we set about evaluating the opportunities in the lending markets, which is really where I built my network as well as built my knowledge base. And that certainly stood us in good stead when we built the working capital and specialty finance business at Highmore. And then after FrontPoint, I went to Oppenheimer and Company, where I joined a former colleague from London, where we teamed up and I would say ran the alternatives business, but we really rebuilt and restructured that business into an alternatives platform that was really differentiated. Rather than just providing Me Too product and providing access, really taking a markets-based approach, focused on areas of inefficiency and really partnering with emerging investment talent where you create the most alignment for a whole host of reasons. And we really left that business in a much stronger footing than the one that we'd initially inherited. In that 2.5 period, we grew the asset base, we built a completely new team, implemented our process, and had a full suite of differentiated offerings. And that took us to the opportunity to start our own firm, which is Highmore.
So Dipak, we ask our managers, what was that pivotal point in time where you decided to go off on your own? But I think more interestingly is just that Highmore is such a multifaceted organization with a lot of very talented people. I think more interestingly would be to talk about the mission and the vision and why you started it, because there's so many different avenues that we could talk about because you guys do so many different things.
That's right. We're an asset management solution provider to a whole host of constituent investors. And that's ranged from families to individuals to institutional investors, really helping solve capital growth, yield, and diversification. Really where I spend my time in the business that I built is our trade and specialty finance business, which really helps companies in the middle market and low middle market release working capital. And when we think about the whole concept of it, I think it's a broader question around entrepreneurship. I always said, the world doesn't need another asset management company. There's plenty of them out there. And there really has to be a reason to exist. As an asset management player, or frankly, any business out there, what do you do that's better or different to other people out there? And really providing a value-added product or a value-added service to the marketplace. And I think we really took our training, certainly the FrontPoint experience and my partner's experience at being at Man, focusing on growth stage investments and doing differentiated things. That's really, I think, the DNA of Highmore. So I would say, looking back, I always felt that at some point I would go off and make that entrepreneurial leap, and Highmore was that leap.
So Dipak, because you guys are such a multifaceted firm, let's just talk about one of the things that you guys do. Talk about the opportunity set and why you developed this product.
So Amanda, we're a multifaceted firm. The business line that I manage is our trade and specialty finance business. And when we look at that business, it's very much solving two things. One, we have the companies that we finance that are looking to solve working capital. And then on the other side, we have a client base that is really looking to solve for generating income in alternative ways than they can in the public markets. So I very much run the business from that standpoint of we're serving those two key constituencies.
Let's talk about, what do you feel that you did right?
Gosh, so it's a pretty deep question because it requires a lot of soul searching. I would say we spend as a team, and it's very much a team-driven approach, as I'll walk you through, how we look at the world and really how we execute. We probably spend more of our time thinking about how we improve, being very critical of ourselves as a team, and really learning from the experiences and case studies and really enhancing what we do. But, really set out with a vision to build a commercial and specialty finance business, really thinking about building a business what I like to describe is an operating system. So when you think about, not to get too technologically focused, when you think about an operating system has really two things to it. You have processing power and you have bandwidth. So every day I really think about our ability to be at maximum processing power, but to increase our processing power. But then how do we increase our bandwidth? And bandwidth can be a number of things. Bandwidth can be our ability to run multiple investment pools for different clients with different risk and return and investment criteria objectives, to the ability to process more transactions across potentially other jurisdictions. And ultimately, this really comes down to three things. It's people, it's the process, but it's also having creative thinking. Now, often when you think about an operating system, and I use terms such as processing power and bandwidth, the last point I made around creative thinking, it's kind of the odd term that's there, but you really need creativity in your overall process. And just to give the audience just a feel for what we do, when we think about providing working capital release solutions, what does that really mean? In the financial services and the credit businesses, there's a lot of things that really complex, esoteric, structured products. At the end of the day, what we do is no different than what we were doing back in the family business, is how do we generate more working capital to grow our business and bring on new product lines, reach out to different constituents of clients, and really expand what we're doing. And what we were doing there is what we help companies do today. And that's really, at the end of the day, business has to do two really important things. They have to pay their suppliers and they have to collect from their buyers. And we really help optimize companies to do that. So everything that we do is super granular. And when I mean granular, if you're in the term loan business, you may put out a term loan. It's a 3-year term. It may have its own schedule around it, but it has monitoring and covenant monitoring and so on and so forth. But we fund at a very high frequency level. So to give you an example, we could be funding anywhere from $3 to $10 million a day. That's funding against purchase orders and invoices. To give you a sense, since we started the business, we've funded over $1 billion of capital that we've dispersed to companies. That's across 23 industries, and that's north of 15,000 invoices. So that's a real high velocity operation that we run. So when you think about what we've done right, we've certainly built a business that has the ability to process a level of volume that is really significant with small and medium-sized enterprises. But against that, you've got your daily funding activities, but then at the same time, you have to be expanding your business as well. And expansion is not simply finding more deals and finding more places where you can source deals and trying to find more capital, but it's really thinking about developing your processes and your systems. And we really think about it in terms of the whole marginal gain concept. Make lots of marginal gains. You look at it over a period of time, that amounts to a step change. So I would say that's the one thing that we've done right. But I've been supported by a really strong team that are very, very complementary and very intellectually honest. Those are real prerequisites for anyone who works with us.
So this is my favorite question. Dipak, you've heard me ask this a million times. What do you think is your superpower and why?
So when I think about superpower, it certainly applies to my day-to-day job. Just more broadly as a person, your ability to adapt. I think the ability to adapt, whether you're in a market environment or an operating business or, frankly, in a family situation, the ability to listen, to understand is really, really important. I think the other aspect, a skill set of superpower, is attention to detail and really looking into nuances. It's the finer details of what's really happening. When you think about it, investing is not an easy business at the end of the day. It may seem obvious but there's a lot of things that go into it and really comes down to detail, discipline, and nuance. And finally, I think it's really the ability to execute. And anyone can have a good idea at the end of the day. It's the ability to actually formulate a plan, to research it, execute it. The minute that plan breathes the light of day, it's going to change. And that goes back to the adaptation and really iterating on that. And I think that's really an important skill that I have.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We really enjoyed hearing your journey.
Thanks very much, Amanda.
Thank you for listening to PrimeAlpha's Visionaries and Innovators podcasts. As always, you can head over to PrimeAlpha.com to sign up to our email list, as well as check out our other podcasts. See you next time. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation of an offer to purchase any investment or any securities. Listeners should make their own investigations and evaluations of the information contained herein. Certain information contained in this podcast constitutes forward-looking statements. Listeners should not rely on these forward-looking statements. Listeners should bear in mind past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.